Welcome, everyone. This practice is a myofascial release practice. This is something you can do on your own with either just a tennis ball and a couple blocks and a blanket, or any other therapy ball. This is a lacrosse ball. This is great as well. Any other therapy ball you have can also work. So today is just a brief practice getting into the upper back, shoulders, and neck area. So we'll be making use of some blocks as well, and possibly a blanket. So when we come into a myofascial release practice, it's really important to have some water handy. You might also drink some water before you practice, especially if you've not had any water recently. It's really important to keep the tissues, the fascia, hydrated and drink plenty of water. So let's get started. We'll start with our neck, and this is really one of my favorite ways to release tightness and tension in my neck. So come to a seat where your hips might be a little higher than your knees, as long as this is comfortable for your legs. If this position doesn't work for you, any comfortable seat is fine. Extend your arms out on either side, sit up nice and tall. And as you exhale, turn your head to your right. Notice how your neck feels, and bring a hand slightly in front of your nose. Move it away, and notice where your nose is pointing. Remember that spot. Lower your hand, come back to center. Exhale, turn your head to your left. Again, notice how this feels. Bring a hand in front of your nose, moving it away. And remember where your nose is pointing on this side. Lower your hand down and come back to center. So we're going to do one more assessment. Hands on either side of you. Just drop your right ear towards your right shoulder. Notice how that feels. And then slowly turn your head to look down. Notice how that feels. And then slowly turn your head again to look slightly up and forward. And then inhale the head back up. Slowly bring your left ear to your left shoulder. Again, notice how this feels. Slowly turn your head to look down. And then slowly bring the head back to look forward, maybe slightly up. And then come back up to neutral. So relax your arms and hands by your side. And take your ball. So for this one, I like to use a lacrosse ball. You can use a tennis ball or any other ball. I like to use a harder ball. For this one, we're going to do on the upper shoulder and the upper trapezius. If you're using a ball that's too squishy, it's not going to work as well. Starting with your right shoulder, and you can either use the same hand to hold the ball or the opposite hand, or even both hands, whatever feels best for your shoulders. So start with the ball right at the base of the neck there, and we're going to push down on the ball and slightly pulling out towards the shoulder. So just a constant pressure and a slight pulling away. You determine the amount of pressure. You can relax whatever arm isn't working. And we'll hold this for just a couple breaths here. And then release that effort. Move the ball slightly away, maybe about quarter to a half an inch. And again, push down and pull slightly away. We're getting into a little bit of the upper trapezius here. This might feel awkward, so you might need to use both hands or your other hand, whatever works for you. Sometimes just using my fingers of both hands pushing down with a slight outward pull works. And then release that. And again, one more time, move the ball slightly further away towards the shoulder. press down, and a slight pulling out. Gets a little more awkward the closer you get to the shoulder. And then relax. Just pause for a moment. Notice any difference between left and right. And then we'll do the same thing on the other side. So again, you can either use the same hand or the opposite hand. Press the ball down and pull slightly out. Making sure your hair's not in the way. One side might feel different than the other. Try to relax whatever arm isn't working. And then release, move the ball slightly away, maybe a quarter inch or so, press down again and slightly pulling out towards the shoulder. It's just a constant press down with a slight pull. Getting into the fascia, a little bit into the muscles, the myofascia. It really needs our attention. We need to move the body, keep the fascia healthy, and drink plenty of water as well. And once more, release, move the ball one more time, slightly away. Press down with a slight pulling away. Find it's a little easier with the opposite hand, as long as you don't have any shoulder issues. And then relax. Set the ball aside. And the next piece for the neck, we're going to use either our fingertips or our knuckles. So same hand, unless you have shoulder issues, and then you could always use fingertips of your opposite hand if this is an uncomfortable position. So bring your knuckles right up behind your right ear, right at that bony protrusion. Relax your other arm, and with some pressure, slowly slide your knuckles down the side of your neck. We'll go for about 10-15 seconds here. And just keeping that constant pressure as you slide the knuckles down the side of your neck. Notice any areas of ropiness or tenderness. Going all the way down the side of the neck till you feel like you reach the base of the neck there. And then gently release, shake that hand and arm out a little bit, and we'll repeat. So again, bringing the knuckles right up behind your ear. At that bony protrusion, slowly slide those knuckles down the side of your neck, sort of ironing out the fascia here. This is one of my favorite ways to release tension and tightness in my neck. I usually do it about once a day. And when you're done there, shake it out. And we'll do one more on this side with a little variation. Bring the hand again up behind your ear. And as you slide the knuckles down the side of your neck, slowly turn your head in the opposite direction. And when you're done, release. I usually go a little faster on that last one. Look straight ahead. Notice any differences between left and right. And then we'll do the other side. Bring your other hand up behind your ear. With some pressure, you determine how much. Slide your knuckles down the side of your neck. I like to have my head angled slightly. Find what feels best to you. Keep your other arm and shoulder relaxed. Gentle pressure here. Constant pressure as you iron out the knots on this side. And notice differences between the right and left side of your neck. And when you get all the way down to the base of the neck there, release, shake that hand and arm out as you need to, and repeat. Notice maybe tender spots, ropiness, whatever you're feeling under those knuckles or fingertips. And again, if you're going much faster than me, you might be doing a couple more repetitions. That's fine as well. Release that hand and arm, shake it out. One more with the variation. Bring your hands right up behind your ear. And as you slide your knuckles down the side of your neck, slowly turn your head in the opposite direction. And when you're done, release, shake those hands and arms out. Come back to your beginning position. Sit up nice and tall. And then exhale, turn your head to your right. Bring your hand in front of your nose, move it away, and notice where your nose is pointing now. If you've gone further, inhale, come back to center. Exhale, turn your head to the left. Again, notice how it feels. Hand in front of your nose, move it away, and notice where your nose is pointing on this side. If you've gone much further, come back to center, and then drop your right ear to your right shoulder. Slowly turn your head to look down. Notice how that feels. If it feels any different, turn your head to look slightly up. Come back to center. Exhale, left ear to left shoulder. Slowly rotate the head to look down. And then slowly turn to look forward. And then again, back up. Notice if you've gone further, if there was less tension or tightness in your neck. Hopefully that feels much better. So let's come off of any props we were sitting on. And we're going to get into the shoulders and upper back. First, we're going to do a little bit of an assessment and just sort of notice how our shoulders and upper back feel. So if you cannot do down dog, you might do this pose, puppy pose, instead. Coming to table pose, reaching your hands out in front of you. Keep your hips over your knees and draw your belly in slightly and take your forehead to the mat or a block. So that's option one for puppy pose. Notice how the shoulders feel, or tuck your toes and come into a downward facing dog. And you might notice your legs too. We're not going to get into the legs in this video. And any movement here that feels good, you might pedal the feet a little bit, but pay attention to your upper body, your shoulders, your arms, your upper back. Notice how this pose feels in that area. And if you're in down dog, lower the knees. And if you're in puppy, walk your hands back up. And we're going to use our blanket and maybe a block for the next one. Put a block at the end of your mat or the top of your mat, whichever, and take your blanket, opening it up, and then roll it from the folded edge into a tight roll. If you do not have a blanket or a towel, you could use a block instead of the blanket. So we're going to position the blanket just about in that position so there's some space, maybe about a foot or more in between the block and the blanket. If you don't have a blanket, you could just place another block there to rest your upper back and shoulder blades on. And then from here, lower yourself down onto your prop so that the blanket is just about at your middle back. Support your head. You can also use another blanket instead of a block to support your head. Use your hands, make sure the block's in the right space, right spot. And then extend your arms out so that your shoulders are above the blanket or the block. You might have your palms up And then straighten your legs out one at a time and just relax over this prop, inviting your shoulders to drip towards the earth. Now, if the prop under your head is too much, you can always remove it and just let your head come onto the mat or maybe a lower prop. And invite the shoulders to soften. Invite your upper back to begin to release. This should feel pretty comfortable. If there's any discomfort in your back, come up, rearrange the props until it feels like you can relax here. You want to be able to invite the body to soften and relax over the props. Beginning to tune into your breath. And after a few breaths, you might begin to notice a gentle release in the upper back. And we'll be here for just a few more breaths. And then very gently begin to deepen your breath. Bring your arms in a little closer. You might bring one hand to the back of your head, gently supporting it. Bend one knee and then the other. Gently lift your head and roll over to one side or the other. And then slowly press your way back up to a seat. Pause here. Notice sensation in your upper back, shoulders. You might still feel like you have that prop on your upper back. Notice if you feel like there's any energy or sensation in the upper back. When we get into myofascial release, sometimes we're sort of compressing the fascia and then we're releasing it. So we're creating space and allowing the fascia to expand and absorb more water in the body. So that's one reason why sometimes we just get thirsty with this practice. Your body's telling you it needs more water. So at any time during this practice, feel free to take a sip of your water. That's totally fine. So we're going to come into a shoulder stretch with the blocks. We'll set the blanket aside for now. Bring the blocks at the front of your mat and come into a table pose so that your fingertips are just behind the blocks and the blocks are about shoulder distance apart. From here, knees are about hip distance apart to start, but you might decide to widen the knees. You can either keep the hips over the knees, and I'll show you that to start. You might come onto one forearm on the mat, and then bring one elbow onto one block, and then bring your other elbow onto the other block. Draw your belly in to protect the low back. Bring your hands together in a prayer position. Be mindful of shoulders here. You may decide you don't need any blocks under your elbows. Keeping the core active slightly, take your hips back and bring your forehead to the mat. If it seems like the mat is too far away, you can do a number of things. One, you might bring a blanket to place in between the blocks so you can put your head on it. And you could even keep the blanket we just had rolled up and place it in between the blocks, something like this. And then you would have the end of the blanket to rest your forehead on. Another option, there's always options, is to bring the knees a little closer to the blocks and a little wider, so that when you bring your elbows onto the blocks and you sit your hips back, sort of like a child's pose, your forehead might more easily come to the mat. And another great option in this similar position, if you want to get into the hips a little bit, is to simply widen your toes away from each other. So you get into the hips quite nicely in this position, a wide-legged child's pose, and a shoulder stretch at the same time. So find your variation and feel free to switch it up a little bit. Maybe stay in the child's pose position and then come up with your knees closer together and hips over the knees for the last part. So come into your position. And remember, you should feel a sensation of stretch, not discomfort. And those of you that are getting the hip stretch, if all of a sudden you decide, now I'm not feeling the shoulder stretch, the other option is to turn the blocks up to the medium setting and then bring your shoulders, or rather, then bring your elbows onto the blocks for a deeper shoulder stretch. And I'm going to just switch up again to the low blocks and bringing my knees over, bringing my hips in line with my knees. Feel free to stay where you are or switch it up as well. And then slowly and thoughtfully on your next inhale, press into your elbows, engage your core. Start to make your way out of this shape. Bring one hand onto the mat and then the other. Make your way to a seat. Set your blocks aside and pause. So our next one will be using the ball. The tennis ball is really great for this one. The lacrosse ball is a little hard. If the lacrosse ball is the only one you have and you're used to it, great, but I prefer a little more give to this one. So we're going to come into constructive rest, laying on our back with our knees bent, and take the tennis ball or whatever ball you're using and place it right under the right shoulder, to the right of your spine, above your shoulder blade, and not on any bones. You're on soft tissue. So from here, you might lift your left shoulder up off the mat, and you might just stay in one spot, or you might find a little bit of movement here. So you determine where you want the ball. And then a little movement side to side. You might find some areas that are quite tender or that feel that they're knots. This is a self-massage, self-myofascia release massage. You're in control here. Move how you want, with the pressure that you want. Maybe moving your arm up or down, whatever feels good. I sometimes like to keep my left elbow on the mat for a little more control. Just find what feels good to you. If you find a good spot, you might just hold and breathe into that area as you just relax your body over the ball. Soft, open mouth sighs of an exhale are really beneficial. Use them whenever you want. And you determine the amount of pressure on the ball. You can make it more or less. And then you might decide to just explore a little different area. Move the ball just slightly, maybe up or down, left or right, and find another spot. And again, move over that ball in whatever way makes sense to you. This is so great for the upper trapezius. Hold a lot of tension and stress and tightness in this area. And just another note, make sure that you keep your head on the mat when you're doing this. If you find another good spot, you might just press over the ball. You can press into your feet slightly to increase the pressure as well. If you want more, you could really press hard, but I encourage you to not do too much too soon, especially if you're new to this, because if you do too much, you might be sore the next day. And then release off the ball. Just hold it in one hand and relax in constructive rest and notice sensation and any differences between the left and right of your upper back and shoulder area. And then we'll place the tennis ball under the left side. So lift your left shoulder up, place the tennis ball under your left shoulder, watching out for hair. Right on the upper trapezius. And again, you might lift the right shoulder up and find some movement left to right, maybe moving that left arm up or down. You can have both arms up, or you can support yourself with that right elbow a little bit. Notice any differences on this side. Find any movement that feels good to you. And again, if you find a really good spot that just needs some release, you might just hold that one area, breathe into it. And whenever you're ready, start to move again over the ball. Adjust the ball as you need to. Make sure that it feels like you're on soft tissue, even if it feels like it's tender tissue. You're not on bone. You're not rolling on your shoulder blade or your spine. You're on soft tissue. Finding whatever movement feels good to you. Pressing into your feet if you want more action. Lowering your right shoulder back to the mat if you want to release any pressure on the ball. That sometimes helps. Or if it's too much, just move the ball to another area, find another spot. Or if you feel you've done that spot enough, find another little area. Move the ball maybe just 1/4 of an inch, left or right, up or down. And again, explore here with some more movement, maybe moving that arm around. Notice how that changes sensation. Just a little more on this side. Adjust the ball as you need to. And again, if you found a good spot, you might just hold and breathe into it. And then release off the ball. Set the ball aside, pause in constructive rest. And then roll over to one side. Push yourself up to a seat. Come up slowly. Pause for a moment. Notice sensations in your upper back, shoulder area. Notice maybe a flow of energy. You might have opened up some pathways that now energy and blood can flow. The fascia holds more neuroreceptors than our muscles. So when we have tight areas in our body, we really do have issues in our tissues. We're holding on to stress and tension. And when we do this practice, we're allowing that stress to release and let go. So it's so beneficial. And then come into a few side bends. Just finding some movement after that release that we did. Maybe a couple side bends on each side. Notice how your shoulders are feeling. Do one more on each side. And then when you're even on both sides, come back up and let's come into that pose we did earlier. Whether it was puppy pose or downward dog, come back into your puppy or down dog. And granted, we've not gotten into the legs much. We haven't really gotten into the legs much at all. But notice how your down dog feels, or your puppy. Notice your upper back and shoulders if you found a little more openness or ease in the upper body. So you can check out one of my other videos for the legs so that you feel you get into the legs and hips as well. Take a few deep breaths here. Enjoy this pose. Any variation of movement that feels good to you. And when you're ready, lower the knees if you were in down dog. Walk your hands back towards your knees if you were in puppy. And bring yourself to a seat. Pause and notice how you feel. Hopefully your water is handy. Drink some water. Tastes so good. So be sure you drink some water and let this be just sort of a warm up to whatever else you're doing or whatever part of your practice you want to make it. You can do this practice as a precursor to your regular yoga practice or anything else you're doing during the day. It's great to do some myofascial release work first, so you can open up the fascia, get that blood flow, release some tightness and tension, and just go about your day with a lot more freedom of movement and more energy. So I hope you like this practice today. Remember, be sure to like and subscribe. check out some of the other videos, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the mat. Thank you, everyone. Namaste.